One thing I try to underline in the book is this idea that the daimon, I believe, is trying to make contact with us as much as we want to contact it. And I think that just logically it follows that if this being is responsible for us, for our souls kind of fulfilling their destiny, their life path, wouldn't it want us to sort of like wake up and get the message as soon as possible? But I think along with that comes it's speaking in different ways to all of us. And
speak the charm of me.
There will come a time on the planet Earth when science and technology will be long forgotten. When wizards will rule the world.
This is the Arnemancy Podcast. The world is weirder than we know. Join your host, Reverend Eric, and his diverse array of amazing guests in an exploration of tarot, magic, the occult, and the history of Western esotericism. The Arnemancy Podcast exists thanks to the support of generous listeners like you. Please consider supporting this podcast for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/Arnemancy. Today I'm joined by astrologer, author, and artist Cat Neligan. Cat incorporates astrology into her work coaching small business owners, helping artists, writers, musicians, and all kinds of creatives to better understand themselves, identify their calling, and share their work with the world. We're going to be talking about Cat's new book, Discovering Your Personal Daimon. Cat, welcome to the podcast.
thank you so much for having me on. I really love the show, and it's an honor to join the ranks.
Oh.
People who get to talk to you.
Well, that's flattering. It's fun to make, and it's great fun because now that it's been around for a little while, like when I reach out to people, they'll be like, "Oh, sure, I'll be on your show." But then also people like you, I hadn't really come across your work before, and you reached out to me, and I was like, "Oh, this is perfect." Like this stuff that you're working with, I love doing this. You know, I guess we'll talk about that later. Let's get into what we're talking about. So you have this new book coming out called Discovering Your Personal Daimon. What does that mean? What is a daimon?
Yeah, well, it basically is describing what I've been up to myself over the past about 2-3 years now. So the daimon is a topic that I guess on some level I've been interested in since I was a little kid. I don't think I called it my daimon. I was raised Catholic, and my mom told me about that. I had a holy guardian angel looking over me, and that was always a very comforting thing. And then I think, I was about 9 or 10, I started reading the Philip Pullman series, and I think a lot of his Dark Materials, and that's where a lot of people have come across this idea of a daimon or a daemon. People call it different things. When I say Daimon, I just think of Matt Damon, so I try not to say it that way. But more recently, getting into this practice of astrology, I came across this concept of the daimon and how it was very much interweaved into, I would say, the foundation of at least traditional Hellenistic astrology. And because it relates to the topic of destiny, calling, what we do with our life, I just couldn't think of anything more interesting. And the more I looked into it, the more fascinated I was, and the more I wanted to discover my own personal daimon. And I guess my research turned into a book at some point, and that's the book.
It's the danger of doing research.
Yes. Yeah.
It's safer if you don't take notes. Then you'll never get a book. So the daimon itself, like it's an interesting word because so you were sort of equating it with the holy guardian angel, and then you brought up Philip Pullman, who I'm unfamiliar with. Who's he? Am I too old for this?
He's an author. He wrote books, or writes books, I guess, for kids and young adults. What was the film you might have heard of, like The Amber Spyglass?
Oh yeah.
It's the. And there was.
Is there like a golden compass or something?
The Golden Compass. That was probably the one that was more popular. Yeah, and all of the characters have a little animal creature accompanying guide.
Oh, like a familiar. Sort of thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's another way of thinking about the daimon completely. And in that series, the daimon that they have will change constantly. Its form evolves while the person is a child, and then when they reach puberty, the daimon basically solidifies into one. animal. And I mean, I used to speak to my stuffed animals as a child, like a lot of people did, but I really did it probably for too long. And I think that idea of having like an accompanying familiar was really appealing. And it still is.
A good friend of mine just had a baby. Oh, I should probably congratulate him. Hey, Austin, congratulations on having a baby.
Remember to send that text.
Yeah. But he sent me the name of the baby. I was like, oh, I had a teddy bear when I was a kid with the exact same name. So yes, I talked to my stuffed animals also.
Good company.
Yeah. So, but the thing, and the word itself, like if you're just reading along and you come across the word daimon, looks like the word demon, which I think is one of those things that kind of might like intimidate or scare a lot of people when they come across it. And the fact that you're also associating it with the holy guardian angel, well, it's something where, I mean, I know a lot of my listeners are, fairly practiced occultists and stuff, but for people who haven't been around this stuff a lot, there's a huge association, like daimon is sort of, it's a Greek word for spirit, right? And it kind of, so it kind of includes angels.
It does. And the thing about what separates the daimon from angels or demons is that for me, it's an intermediary character. It exists in the in-between. And throughout this book, I kept coming back to, it's neither this nor that, or it's both and it's hard to pin down. And that almost plays into this kind of trickster-like character of it. But addressing the idea of okay, so a lot of your listeners are probably way more familiar with the idea of the holy guardian angel from the kind of occult, like the HGA.
Oh yeah,
idea than I am. Like this was something that I attempted to research for the book, and it's a massive area.
So can I ask you about? So you were saying that like when you were raised Catholic and you were told that you had sort of a guardian angel, was there some kind of like lore around that, or was it just sort of a platitude? For
me as a kid, and this is the only time I really encountered it, it was just something that Mum told me to put me at ease. But again, when researching for the book, it was something that I can't actually remember what pope it was, but the pope at the time was very encouraging to people, adults, people of all ages, to acknowledge that they had a personal guardian angel. As far as I know, in like Catholic law, it really is a protective force.
Okay.
Whereas, as I've understood it, the daimon itself, I can't accept that the daimon that I'm most interested in is just a protective force. For me, it's much, much more about destiny. And you mentioned that daimon's another word for spirit. Well, it really translates also to the word destiny. And even this afternoon, I was reading through a copy of Plato's Republic that I hadn't seen before. It's just I stole it off my dad. But basically, the bit in at the end where you have a myth, the myth of which is in Plato's Republic. It's one of the last kind of sections in it, which is quite a foundational story for my understanding of the daimon. Instead of using the word daimon, it uses the word destiny. And I was like, it was quite. I don't know. I knew that there was a big connection between daimon and destiny, but I didn't expect this author, this translator, to have directly translated daimon to destiny.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and it makes you think. It means that, well, the daimon can't really it's not just going to protect you from harm, And I in the book, I talk about Socrates as daimon or daimonian, who didn't discourage him from, facing his death. That wasn't a protective force at that point. So I had to kind of, reassess that the daimon isn't just this kind of cuddly character that's going to protect me from harm. It's something else.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We will have to come back to that because I think there's some cool stuff to dive into there, like connecting those two ideas. I guess that does make sense. Socrates is sort of like well known for having his guiding spirit or his, genius or whatever that speaks to him and like gives him advice and likes people sometimes and doesn't like them and all this interesting stuff. You have done a lot of work with the daimon. It isn't something that you've just researched. It's something that you've actually, like as a practitioner, you have sort of pursued knowledge of this and working with this spirit idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And while, again, going back to that HGA thing, I haven't done any very formal rituals myself. It's been a lot of, my first approach was through astrology. And basically a quarter of the book is dedicated to the daimon in astrology. And there isn't one set way of connecting with discovering your personal daimon through astrology, but it was definitely something that was debated and discussed by Neoplatonists who were, practicing astrology. So in the book, I kind of connect like 4 different, let's say, approaches to understanding the daimon in our birth chart. And these are all 4 things that I've practiced myself and I've been exploring with other people during this time as well. As for like the problem with this was like that bit for me is like, that's the easy part, doing the kind of the even the more mathematical kind of approaches to the daimon in astrology. The thing that I struggled more with was having a more intuitive connection with the daimon. And that's really what I've been seeking throughout this process. And actually writing the book, there have been some interesting moments of, again, I think my daimon has a particular character, and the kinds of bothersome wake-up calls that it's been giving me throughout this book writing process has definitely been helpful information for me in terms of how to connect with it. But one of the things I would say is just being an observer in my life has been a really helpful thing. So one of the things that happened to me when I was writing this book, it was earlier in the year, where I was kind of like chipping away at the book, and it wasn't my main priority. It was kind of just going along in the background, and I set up a Scrivener project and research every now and then was going into it. One day when I updated my computer, I lost the entire project pretty much. I had saved like some documents in different places, but I lost the whole thing. And I had to kind of come to terms with like, am I serious about this? Am I actually going to make this into a book? And it really, to me, I interpreted that as a way of my daimon kind of giving me a kick up the arse, as we'd say, to commit to it.
That's interesting. And it also kind of walks into the idea about the daimon and destiny, because it's really sort of like, this is a test. Are you really going to do this or not? And it's really not just like some magic crossing guard who's holding your hand all the time.
No, and that would be nice, but mine doesn't seem to be that interested in that.
Well, at least it hasn't led you to prison and poison yet.
Yes, exactly. Better fate than Socrates.
Yeah. So then, I mean, it's interesting. It sounds like you're kind of using much older techniques. A lot of the HGA stuff, at least in Western esotericism, is pretty new. Like it comes from like the Golden Dawn, and I mean, I guess there's like the Book of Abramelin, but even that's much newer than the Hellenic astrology stuff, and it's intense. Like, the Abramelin ritual takes, I don't know, 6 months or a year or something like that, and it's not. It's definitely something you have to be like independently wealthy and own property in the country and have like a servant boy and a giant sandbox and like all this stuff like that none of us can really afford to do these days.
Exactly.
So when you're talking about the astrology of the daimon, like how does it help you get in touch? Like what are some of the things that you have to look at, or some of the approaches you have to take?
Sure. Yeah. And all of the 4 techniques, I think, tell us something different about the daimon. One of the simplest ways I like to start out is just looking at the 11th place and the 12th place, or the 11th house and the 12th house. So a lot of people know kind of, okay, the 11th house has something to do with groups, and it's it represents good things in our life. 12th house, a bit more difficult. But most people don't know that these, all of the houses have different, that they were called different things by the ancient Greeks. So like the first place was the helm, the 7th place was like the setting place. The 11th place was the place of good daimon or good spirit. And the 12th was the place of bad daimon or bad spirit. And I was like, okay, cool. That's like the first place we see the daimon, on quite a basic level, even in the structure of the birth chart. So that just again, looking at clients' charts, looking at my own, and looking at like different celebrities and trying to understand 11th house experience. I'm sorry, I keep saying place and house. You can use them interchangeably.
That's cool. I'm just going to assume that they mean the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So just putting that together. And what I saw was, well, the 11th house and 12th house, they don't speak to the nature of your daimon, but they do speak to daimonic experiences. So, for example, an 11th house character in your life could be somebody who gives you a leg up. So I've had this. I've had like awesome astrology friends who've really kind of given me a leg up in the industry, let's say. And that feels like, okay, they've been helping hands on my path, this path of destiny. And people can have this in all forms of, different individuals we encounter and groups, because, of course, that is an 11th house topic. It's this idea that anything that kind of lifts you up to the 10th house, the place where we're kind of what we're known for in the world. And while that isn't just jobs, it's not just like work, it really is a question of destiny, I think. So that's the 11th house. And then the 12th house, different ways of seeing this. I don't think that the 12th house daimon is this bad daimon who's pulling us away from our path. I think it's just the more difficult experiences and encounters that we have that still lead us onto our path, but they just are more subjectively hard. And one of the examples I give in the book is Joni Mitchell, who she had polio as a child, and that meant that she was, basically like locked away in her room, maybe not locked in her room, but she was bedbound for many months as a child, which is a very 12th house experience. You're kind of isolated from the world and you're sick. It's not good. But ultimately, because of that, her guitar tuning, because her arms were like a little bit weaker, she developed an unusual kind of guitar tuning. And there are other examples, but ultimately it's stuff like that which made her stand out as one of the few famous women guitarists of the 20th century. So all of this to say, those 12th house experiences for me are a way to see the bad daimon. I'm doing the inverted brackets thing, comments thing.
We call them
still
finger quotes over here.
Yeah, finger quotes. That's it.
So are you, when you're talking about this, like, it sounds like you're talking about more than one daimon. So do you think, is that what's happening? Is there more than one?
No. So no,
Okay.
What I'm saying is more so that experiences and encounters are daimonic in their nature. So this is where the idea that you have, like, I really like the idea of having an entity which is very much like the childhood toys that I interacted with as my like personal daimon. And I believe personally that I do have a kind of a personal entity that I could talk to, but that doesn't mean that it's like us. It's not, when I see the daimon more as destiny itself, and it's kind of like a personification of destiny, that's when I can make room for something bigger than just like an actual spirit or entity. Not that that's not a big thing. So the 11th house and 12th house start to become something much bigger. It's more descriptive of, again, people and experiences that are daimonic in nature, in that they steer us onto our path.
Okay.
So that, yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, but you're still, okay. When you were talking about sort of wanting to see the daimon as something that you can like interact with or have a personification thing, do you feel then that these like the good daimon and bad daimon interactions are manifestations of that, or like layers of it, or is it something that maybe we don't get to know?
I think manifestations of it is a really good way of putting it.
Okay.
I think, like, let's say our daimon is maybe even on some level orchestrating those encounters.
So
that
going back to that guide, and that's the part of the destiny sort of thing. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So while the daimon, because a lot of people basically won't experience the daimon maybe ever in their life as like a voice, who's telling them this is what you're meant to do. But what they will experience very directly are individuals and, illnesses, promotions that will have been, especially it's much easier in hindsight, that's like the thing with astrology, will be easy to reflect on and say, okay, well, I can see why that had to happen. That was part of my destiny. That was, yeah, maybe that was my Daimon orchestrating that in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then do you think then that the houses might give you clues as to what your Daimon is going to do to you?
Yeah, I think you can, in terms of like, more predictive work, I think you could see them as like themes mm-hmm. of what the Daimon kind of shows up as in your life. So with Joni Mitchell's chart, she has a couple of planets in the 12th house, and one of them, there's a connection between, I think, either a planet in the 12th house rules her 5th house. So for me, that was, okay, there's a connection there between 12th house experiences and her creativity and also her children. So she gave her daughter up for adoption when she was, I think starting her career. And that ultimately shaped her writing, her songwriting as well. So to me, that was another experience where, okay, there's a separation between mother and child. That's like a 5th house, 12th house thing. And it's also played into her creativity. So you can do some really interesting things using like basic traditional astrology techniques to understand, difficult Daimon themes, which can be really helpful for a client who's like, this is a really challenging thing in my life. But I'm like, and as the reader, I'm telling them, actually, while this might be a difficult experience, this is like 100% your destiny and a very important part of your destiny. So does that make sense?
No, that does make sense. Did you find this how did you start to use the astrology of the Daimon, or when you were looking at the astrological aspects of it, how did you use that to start forming your connection?
So what the final technique that I outline in the book is much more to do with understanding the nature of your personal Daimon. And this is where there was much more like debate in my research. And ultimately I ended up on a technique that Porphyry outlines in his introduction to the Tetrabiblios. So it's a very short piece of writing that we have from Porphyry, but it was a pretty neat technique that I was like, okay, I'm just going to attempt this and again, experiment with it. And what you do is you're just trying to find the strongest, best planet in your birth chart. This is a different technique because maybe some of your listeners will be familiar with Agrippa, Henry Cornelius Agrippa's work on this as well. And this technique that he has to find the strongest planet, the Almutin in the birth chart. Mm-hmm. And he also, you come up with a name for your Daimon at the end of it. I prefer the older technique because it's older, but I'm really open to different approaches to however you want to find the strongest planet in your chart, I think is perfectly acceptable. But the idea here was that this planet would be the planet. It isn't your Daimon, like Mars isn't anyone's Daimon because, we've all got Mars in our chart and Mars is bigger than the Daimon, but it can show you potentially something of the nature or something of, something of the nature of the Daimon. I'll leave it at that. Does that make sense? So for me, figuring out that my Daimon had primarily like a solar, sun-like nature was really helpful. And it meant, and it, in different ways, it sort of aligned with like my pre-existing ideas of what my Daimon was like, and including like a vision that I'd had of the Daimon. I haven't had a lot of visions of it, so don't expect some like amazing stories of my personal Daimon, but certainly like the color gold and that seemed to, occur quite a lot in this area.
Was Porphyry's and did Porphyry's approach you I might have missed this in your explanation. I got a little lost when you started talking about Agrippa.
Okay.
Did Porphyry's explanation use astrology a whole lot, or was it? Because I know that like Hellenistic astrology didn't have. There was still a lot of development happening, so there were techniques that were different, approaches that were different, things that really weren't the same as Agrippa would have looked at astrology in a different way, as a Renaissance astrologer instead of a Hellenistic astrologer. Did Porphyry's approach use a lot of astrology, or was it something else?
Oh yeah. It was 100% astrology.
Okay. All right. Cool. I'm sure you said that, and I just sort of was thinking about Agrippa's math and stuff.
That's interesting though. What I was trying to understand, because I haven't looked into medieval astrology as much, or later astrology, but what I think Agrippa focuses more on is the essential dignity of a planet. So what domicile it's in and that kind of rulership. The older techniques, while that is considered, it's not the priority. It's a lot more about like angularity, like the bound lord of the ascendant, and different planets, basically.
Yeah, and also, I mean, a lot of those are just techniques that the Renaissance and medieval astrologers just weren't doing anymore, too, which is interesting.
And I think, and definitely neither is better. And if anything, if I was bringing out a second edition, I would include Agrippa's technique as well. Because I don't want to confuse people, but I would just encourage them to go with whichever one they find to speak.
Yeah. I think Agrippa has 3 techniques.
Okay.
Some of them are really confusing. I mean, they're really confusing to me, but I'm not an astrologer. Some of them are just very, like you use a calculator and you get it, and others are like, oh, and then here are some more astrological terms you're gonna have to look up in a different book.
It still feels like a little bit like that with Porphyry. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I wish it was simpler, but in a way, I mean, one of the points that Dorian Greenbaum brings out in a book called The Daimon in Hellenistic Astrology, which, I take a lot of the astrology from. But she does say that, Porphyry outline it kind of has a little disclaimer that, this is probably the most difficult technique in all of astrology. And her conclusion was Porphyry's kind of like act of finding the daimon is like a ritual in itself, just through doing the astrology, which really appealed to me.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I was complaining earlier about the Abramelin ritual and how it's this long, really drawn out thing. I guess maybe a recurring theme is that getting in touch with your daimon or having any sort of communication with it isn't really always that easy. Or at least for most of us, maybe Socrates had an easy time of it, but he was way special.
I wonder if it's just our like life stuff, or whatever the Neoplatonists called it, the stuff that starts with a H. It's like the stuff that's kind of blinding us, prevents that. One thing that I try to underline in the book is this idea that the daimon, I believe, is trying to make contact with us as much as we want to contact it. And I think that just logically it follows that if this being is responsible for us, for our souls kind of fulfilling their destiny, their life path, wouldn't it want us to sort of like wake up and get the message as soon as possible? But I think along with that comes it's speaking in different ways to all of us. And with me, astrology has just made me a lot more like aware of what the hell I'm doing, the different patterns in my life. So I think if you're already somebody who's interested in astrology, maybe you practice it yourself, or you see an astrologer, I think that is all the work of the daimon anyway. You can't really get away from the daimon if you're studying astrology, at least the good kind.
Yeah, that's probably true. So one of the things that you talk about in your book are the different faces of the daimon, the 4 faces of the daimon. Maybe we already talked about that when we were discussing the houses, but I was just wondering, could you maybe go into that a little bit? Like, what does that really mean?
Yeah, and this was basically my way of trying to grapple with all of the different roles that I've seen the Daimon show up for different people when I was like researching this. You could add more faces to this, but for me, one of the first ones that I had encountered was the creative face of the Daimon. And this is where you might have the concept of the muse, which, you know, that's an old Greek concept in itself. And while I don't confuse the muses with the Daimon, this idea of creatives having something that moves through them, when a writer or an artist is like, that wasn't me, that was something else that came through me. Mm-hmm. To me, that's a way of seeing the Daimon. And yeah, I hope that these faces, at least that one in particular, are a way for people to kind of let the Daimon into their life. It's like, oh yeah, I've had that experience. I've had that experience where I was in a flow state and, you know, time was completely distorted and, you know, I was just completely absorbed in the task. I think that's a Daimon kind of experience. I think that's when the Daimon has us in its grip.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay.
And you know, and one of my favorite books that I read about the Daimon or involving the Daimon was, oh God, I think it's called Daimonic Creativity, or like Anger, Madness, and the Daimonic. It's by Stephen Diamond anyway. Mm-hmm. And he mentions a lot of different people throughout history who have maybe been in the grip of the Daimon, and it shows up in a very like challenging way. You know, you have so many, like, I remember my like art teacher telling us about, you know, Picasso and all of these people who don't really seem like very nice people, but who make amazing art and who, you know, really shape the history of, you know, civilization for us. You know, and I feel like they were doing the Daimon's work. It also meant that they were maybe not the nicest of people at times.
Oh yeah, I mean, and we keep running into those sorts of people. I was actually just having a conversation about Roman Polanski with a friend of mine, and I was just like, you know, I don't want to talk about him as a person, but this movie that he made was really great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and we're always tasked with that idea of, you know, can you accept the art? You know, even if you don't accept the artist.
In spite of the artist, yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me, understanding the Daimon has helped soften that a little bit in a way.
Oh man, that does make sense. That does help. Yeah. It's funny. We talked about this a little bit in email, but there are, I guess, kind of contemporary to Porphyry, there are other methods of contacting like personal spirits. Like in the Greek Magical Papyri, there's this spirit that there are maybe like 6 to 10 different rituals to do it, to contact a spirit called a pardemos, which is like a personal daimon sort of familiar helper spirit. And none of them are easy. All of them require just lots of strange hoops you have to pass through. And I think one of them has like a donkey skull that you have to enchant in weird ways. And like, it's complicated though. It's always a pretty complicated operation.
The closest I've come, you've probably had him on the show, but Frater Acker.
I know of him. I haven't had him on the show yet.
Yeah, I do think that in Holy Daimon, he does have a really like accessible way to maybe approach these kinds of rituals. But even for me, I was like, am I really going to eat a raw egg? I trust me, Daimon, I really want to make contact with you, but it's how far do you want to go with this? And honestly, my readers I even in the subtitle, it was, this is an accessible guide. And as much as I personally, like, part of me does want to, you know, at some point in my life, book like 18 months off and get the Abramelin done. It's probably not going to happen. And the way, when I was researching this, I was like, so many people have encountered the Daimon. They haven't done these rituals.
True.
I'm seeing evidence in their life of this. And so it just depends how. I'm trying to encourage people also to figure out their own understanding of the Daimon. And by presenting, for example, these 4 faces of the Daimon, I'm hoping that like at least one of those faces will be something that people can, you know, okay, I identify with that. I can get behind that. I can see myself getting to know that character. Yeah. So sorry, yeah, going back to the rituals. I mean, even things like with the creative face of the daimon, that was encouragement for me to explore my own art a bit more and be like, okay, what kind of art would I have to make that would elicit maybe that flow state? Because let's say that is one way that I feel I'm connecting with the daimon. And people might have other ways of doing that, but I do think that that idea of a flow state makes a lot of sense as to one way of knowing, okay, that's a yes from the daimon.
Yeah, I guess I wonder sometimes, I mean, if the creative face of the daimon is so powerful, I mean, we know that Picasso wasn't doing magic rituals, for instance. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I think for some of us it is easier, but also I think a lot of people who get into doing magic rituals make a lot of barriers for themselves along the way, where they're like, no, this has to be a difficult ritual. This sounds too good to be true if it's not a difficult ritual.
Yeah. I wonder if Saturn is their like daimon's nature, like that they have this Saturnian daimon with. If it's worth doing, it has to be hard. Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to explore in itself. And I think, if I'm honest, like that's probably why I prefer the more like the lengthy process in astrology of trying to make contact with the daimon. And ultimately, this isn't one of the things that, it's not that I dislike about the rituals. I just don't trust myself that I would make like contact with the daimon once and then that's it, like we're buddies for life. And I know that I'm sure that's not what people are saying who perform these rituals. I know that it's more of an ongoing relationship. But for me, the astrology was my ritual for getting that initial kind of groundwork down and to feel like, okay, I've got something to work with. Even if it's just a planetary symbol and that's all I've got, that's a starting point. And I can explore the symbolism of that planet to maybe, experiment with other ways of connecting with the daimon. But in the final section of the book, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to just give a wide range of ideas that are practical enough that it's not a stretch for somebody to go out and do these things, even on a very regular basis. And ideally I'm talking daily, and I wish I could say that I'm doing all of these things daily, but it's still hard for me. And yeah, so I definitely don't need to make it harder on myself. it's hard enough to like. Yeah.
Hold on, let's go back to the faces a little bit, because in your book you list 4 of them, right? There's the creative, which we talked about. There's the divine, which I think makes sense. The dark, I can imagine what that would be. But then one of the faces is the animal face. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and you actually mentioned this at the beginning yourself. The familiar, so like the witch's familiar. That was and that whole face was the last face I actually added, and it was because I'd read this book by Maja Zau on familiars and witchcraft, and it's a wonderful book where she really outlines the different ways. I just thought it would be about black cats, and it would just be this like historical witchy book, which is fine, but it wasn't. It's a lot more, and it was a lot more about different ways people have had very like intimate relationships with either spirits or animals, or the daimon, and just how the daimon might have shown up throughout history. So I really like that idea of the daimon showing up as a pet, like as a pet, but like I think even beyond that, like a magical familiar, and and that could even be like an imagined familiar. It wouldn't necessarily have to be a real animal either. Some witches would have had would have worked with imaginal kind of counterparts. And this idea of like a kind of a soulmate through the daimon, and how again we've seen that in different cultures. I can't remember what the name of the tribe was. This is terrible when you forget your own book. But this idea that you could have I think it was an ally. One author described it as an ally. And that could be a person, but that people could actually like marry that person, and that would be like a magical familiar / daimon. Sorry, I'm getting confused because like you can use different words for these things, and that's
right, yeah,
that's a challenge. But let's just call it the daimon, and
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's that. All right, I guess that totally makes sense, and I hadn't really made that connection. So then, are the divine and the dark faces kind of like opposites of each other, or how do they interact?
Yeah, so I think the dark face in a way is closer aligned with the creative face, and it's kind of like I wouldn't say it's a necessary part of the daimon, but for example, what happens when you ignore your daimon? And a way of interpreting that would be a daimon that's maybe like causing trouble to try to get your attention. That could be thought of as the dark face of the daimon. But I would say also when we're talking about the artists who, you know, kind of let their creativity overtake them, again, I think that's the dark face of the daimon. And one of the examples in the book is Captain Ahab in Moby Dick, and he let his kind of, you know, his obsession with the whale obviously get the better of him. That in a way, the whale was, let's say, his daimon in that instance, or the dark daimon in that instance. And equally, that book, you know, on a macro scale, was the author Herman Melville. Like he kind of went off the rails once he had finished writing that book. So, you know, was that book showing up as a daimon in his life?
Okay, yeah, interesting.
As for the divine face of the daimon, this was an idea that came when I was watching a lecture by David Newjars, like it's a Dutch name. And he was talking about well, I'm just sort of like for asking for apology for not.
I mean, nobody can pronounce Dutch except for the Dutch, but
yeah, okay, that's a relief. So he mentions the kind of the Sufi idea of the angel, and that this is so the harder one for me to get my head around, but it's like the face that God shows you. It's a very personal face of God, and it's actually probably my favorite concept of the daimon. That especially for somebody who feels like the divine is a very far away thing, this idea that the divine is showing itself to you through a very personalized form. And yeah, does that make sense? But yeah, certainly like the Sufi tradition seem to have the most interesting ideas on that. But you can see it in other ways. I feel like it shows up in other mystical traditions as well. This idea that there is a very personal form of God,
right?
For each of us.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I like that the Sufi idea too. The personal face of God. Like you never get to see like actual God, but there is this one aspect, that one side of the die or whatever.
Yeah, and it also means that like we don't all have to agree what that looks like.
Right.
Yeah, that would, I think it would be a really harmonious way to deal with that question of what is God, because maybe it's a very deliberate thing that we're seeing it in a unique way.
Yeah, that really could be. Yeah, this is I love this topic. It's very, you know, you can talk about it in sort of this way where it's like a magical imaginary friend, but then when you really start to get into it, it is really something like, it's easy to say that the daimon is like the guide to your destiny, but then you have to think about like, what exactly does destiny mean? And how is that sort of like, you know, I guess it's sort of like, do you guys have bowling in England?
Oh, we certainly do. Yeah.
You guys probably invented it, actually.
We call it booling. No, we don't.
Booling.
That's the sort of thing.
But it's sort of like, you know, your destiny is sort of the thing that keeps you out of the gutter balls, right? They're out of the gutters. Yeah. And, you know, you still have the whole lane to play in, but so your holy guardian angel, your daimon, is sort of the thing that's like, oh, no, don't that's too far astray. But it also, like, there's a much deeper element to it. You know, if the daimon is like your personal face of God, it really is sort of a thing where, like, every single one of us might have this sort of like guiding principle, or every single one of us would have this kind of guiding principle that keeps us all moving in one particular track or in one particular direction. We might only get to see like a little sliver of it. You know, we might only even get to see slivers of it when the daimon reveals itself in some way. But that's sort of, it really does sort of like lead into this much deeper, I mean, I don't know what to call it, a philosophy, a worldview, like a view of how everything kind of clicks together.
This is kind of the problem with it. It hurts my head if I think too hard about it. But one of the favorite, you made me think of a couple of things, because this is probably my favorite bit, is when you do get into that pondering fate, destiny, what's the difference between those things as well, which is something I try to deal with in the book. But one of my astrology friends said that for them, I think the daimon actually, appeared to them, or they got a message from their daimon saying, I am you looking back at yourself from the end of life. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, that's just one to kind of meditate on. And it also made me think about the problem of time. And the reason none of this makes sense to us is because we're dealing with time.
And time is bullshit.
Yeah, time is totally, I have that tattooed. It's that idea that if this was all happening, like, simultaneously, which on some level it is. I always think of you've seen Donnie Darko. Oh
yeah.
And one of my favorite images in that is they have those, because I think that is very much a story about the daimon. But they have those kind of like tubes of, I guess, destiny that you can walk on.
That's right. And Donnie Darko also has Harvey in it.
Ah, yes. See, I also think that's influenced my own kind of concept of the daimon, because anything with like a big kind of like furry animal head is, I feel like that's,
it's the animal face.
Whether it's a rabbit, a fox, some kind of woodland creature, that's the daimon. So those kind of like wormhole-y tunnels, I always sort of start to think about that when I think about this concept of the daimon and destiny, and the question, like, can we ever really go off our path? That, I mean, I'm not going to have an answer to that, but I do think that some things are more on your path than others. And one of the ways, I mean, a lot of people experience like synchronicities, and one of the classic kind of new agey like ideas is, if you're seeing a lot of synchronicities, well, you know that you're on your path. Well, I don't think we need to simplify it as much as that. I do think that there are certain times that when you start doing this work on the daimon, just start asking the question, what is my daimon? What is my destiny? I do think that events start to reveal themselves that make you feel like, yes, I am doing this thing, regardless of whether it looks like how I expected it to.
Right. Yeah. Destiny is it feels exhausting to think about too. You're just sort of like, oh my God, there's more.
Yeah. Can I share one of my favorite quotes, because which really helped me understand destiny from one perspective, was from this guy, Alexander Lowen, who's a psychologist, who said, the difference between fate and destiny is like how birds are fated to fly and fish are fated to swim, but that's not their destiny. And it's that idea that we will have a fate in the terms of the kind of life, a lot of our life that we kind of get lumped with, the deal we get dealt, the lot that has been given, that's been cast. But destiny, especially when I approach it through astrology, feels a lot more to do with the consciousness that I bring to that fate, or the how of the what. Like, how do I deal with being born in this place, or how do I deal with this job that I hate? I feel like those are more the questions of destiny.
That makes sense. Yeah. Where one of them is kind of the outer limits of what you can possibly change given the circumstances that you're dealt. You're a bird. If you really, really want to not fly, you can totally waddle around on bird legs the whole time, but your destiny is probably going to be approaching rather quickly.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I like that. I feel I interviewed an astrologer maybe like a year and a half ago. It was right at the beginning of the lockdown stuff. And I remember this because I think we had to do the interview over the phone because my internet sucked. Mm-hmm. And his name is Alan Drake, and he loves Hellenistic astrology and was deep in some of the like really, really difficult Hellenistic astrology books and trying to explain fate and destiny to me. It's probably a very entertaining interview if you can get over the sound quality.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I'm going to check that out.
All right, that's I think you might really enjoy it. He thinks about this stuff a lot, and I think it's a really big part of his astrological practice. Okay, so we don't have a whole lot of time now, so I really want to hear a little bit about some of the practices. You don't have to give away the secrets of your practices for connecting with the Daimon, because then we'll tell people about the Kickstarter so that they can just go read about it themselves.
Awesome. Well, okay. I'll share all of the and these are probably things that some people will already be doing. One of my favorite ways to connect with the Daimon is writing to it. And this is a practice that kind of evolved from morning pages. That idea by Julia Cameron in her book, The Artist's Way, suggests writing like 3 pages, like
just, 750 words.
And just getting all of the kind of brain crap that's built up over the night out first thing in the morning, just like a ritual every single morning before you actually do anything else. And not even reading it back, just everything, every bit of that internal monologue, get that out. And from that, I started thinking, because I've already got this practice, and I'll even do it if I wake up at like 3 a.m., which a lot of people I feel like got sleep issues during this COVID time. And I was definitely one of them. And I would start, instead of just writing out everything that was on my mind, I would start addressing that to the Daimon and, start posing it questions. And the crazy thing, even though I'm not generally somebody who's very like, I can channel stuff and hear things. I'm really not. And yet this practice of writing out a question and writing, like just letting myself write whatever that answer is, over time, you start feeling like that I didn't come up with that answer. That was something else that answered me. And to me, that even if it's not the Daimon, it's still a really incredibly helpful practice. And I think it kind of trains us to kind of trust our intuition a bit more.
That's a really interesting practice, because I think that's also how people who learn like automatic writing and that sort of like mediums channeling stuff, I think they do something similar to that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I think it's all coming. I mean, and you could call it, that's like Steve up there in the Pleiades coming through. Fine, right. That's fine. But like for me, it's that I'm speaking to the Daimon, and if you don't want to get some other entities, maybe very clearly address it to your Daimon. Maybe that's a reason to find its name. I don't know. This is choose your own adventure kind of thing. But for people who don't feel like, for example, another practice might be, meditation, kind of, and also playing with, I'm careful. I don't want to say active imagination, that this is something that some people will already be familiar with active imagination. Right.
Or you're talking about sort of the, I like to call it the imaginal faculty.
Oh yeah.
Using the imagination as a sensory organ, sort of.
Yeah, I love exactly, and going into a place where you can encounter the Daimon in the imaginal realm.
Oh right, yes, sort of like a journeying or yeah. I know that practice. That's a good one, actually.
Yeah, and I feel like that's just going to appeal to some people more than others. And I think, I don't know if you would see it this way, but people who are more like able to very some people say, oh, I can't visualize stuff very easily.
Yeah.
And for them, I'm just like, okay, I think, if I said, what does an orange look like? You could probably conjure that up on some level. At the same time, I mean, my friend pointed this out to me. There's this classic, practice that like in art school you might be given, which is to draw a bicycle from your imagination. And everyone sucks at it. Unless you're like, your bicycle like really, really well. Most people can't draw a bicycle from their heads.
Right.
So, but anyway, if you're not confident in your visualization abilities, maybe the writing practice will be better.
I like that. There a lot of people have difficulty with the visualization techniques, and I feel guilty a lot because a lot of the stuff that I teach relies super heavily on visualization techniques, and then I'm always like, well, I feel like there's all these people I'm leaving out. How do I fix that? So it's great that you have both approaches. You've done well.
Thank you. No, that's what I'm trying. But I wouldn't want to say, because that's awesome that that's what you're doing, because I think it is a practice, and I believe everyone can do it. I don't want to try to convince them that they can.
Right.
I think they can.
Well, it's because I actually know some artists who say that they can't do it, and I'm just sort of like, I don't know.
Yeah. What happens before you put the pen to the paper? Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not sure. You can never know what is passing in another person's mind.
Yeah. Yet.
Oh, no. Okay, now let's talk about your book. So it's not out yet. You have a Kickstarter going on. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Yeah,
so this was a way for me to make myself launch the book and actually tell people about it. There was no way for me to do that without launching a Kickstarter, it seems. But it's also meant that I've been able to offer different rewards alongside the book. So everyone who supports the campaign will obviously get a copy of the digital version of the book. And then there are a range of other Daimon related goodies from a 12-week course that I gave earlier this year, and people can, watch that in their own time. So we've also got one-to-one Daimon readings where I go through the 4 astrological techniques with you in your birth chart. And people were also demanding the hard copy of the book. So I've added a tier now where you can get a nice hardback edition. So I'm excited about that, though I'm kind of scared about sending a lot of books to people. So,
it's fine. You just have to. Oh, here's a hint: buy a label printer.
Ooh, that's a fun thing to have anyway.
Yeah,
Done.
They only cost like $17, which I think is like £3.
Good tips. Thank you.
So I'll make sure that there's a link to the Kickstarter in the show notes. And
it ends on October 31st.
October 31st. Okay, excellent. Which is Halloween. Excellent. Cool. And then you also have a YouTube channel.
Yes, and I've had a podcast since 2016, but it became astrology about a year and a half ago. So what you'll find there is weekly astrology forecasts. And after this Kickstarter is over, I'm going to start putting out more information about the Daimon anyway. So yeah, you can find me just search Cat Neligan or Cat Rose on YouTube. Or
go to the show notes and there'll be a link for that also. And then people can also find you on your website, I assume?
Yes.
And that is
catroseastrology.com.
Okay, awesome. This is excellent. I really, really love this topic, and hopefully, if you have more developments in the future, I would love to have you back on to talk about it some more.
Thank you. I'd love to have you on my show if you're up for it at some
Absolutely.
point.
I'll probably have to clean my room a little bit since you are. But yeah, thank you. This has been Cat Neligan. Thank you, Cat.
Thank you very much.
This has been another episode of the Arnemancy Podcast. Thank you for joining me. I have been your host, Reverend Eric. You can find Arnemancy online at arnemancy.com, and you can subscribe to this podcast anywhere podcasts are found. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting the Arnemancy Project for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/Arnemancy.